Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of my show today. Today on the show, we are going to go over projected win totals for college football and my way too early college football rankings 19 through 13. So let's get started. My first projection for win total is Miami of Ohio. They have an over-under of 6 wins. I'm going to say they hit the over and make it. I say they get 7 wins, get to a bowl game, and I'd call that a successful season. And personally, I'm not a Miami of Ohio fan, but I know people that are, and they would be happy if they made another bowl game. And I think they might win their conference this year, the MAC. Now let's move on to the next team. The USF, University of South Florida Bulls. Their win projection sits between 1 win and 11 win. And I'm going to take the under because it's their first year under a new head coach and Alex Golish. And I think they're going to get between, I would say, the number I would give them for wins is probably, I would say 5 or 6 wins, because they do have a relatively, besides Alabama, light schedule. I think Alabama might beat them, but then again, they might beat Alabama, and that would be a big upset, but it's just too uncertain right now because, one, you don't know who the starting quarterback's going to be going into week 1. It could be 3 people. It could be Gary Bohannon. It could be Byron Brown, or it could be Katrivis Marsh, which he is still at USF, and he is still on their football team. He did not enter the transfer portal and leave. He is still there. Getting on to the third team. And here's another team that I have the over with their win projection. UCF. It's their first year in the Big 12. And their win total is set at 6.5. I'm taking the over because they return their QB, John Rice Plumlee, and a lot of their skill position players from last year when they were runners-up in the American Athletic Conference. But now they're in a tougher conference, the Big 12. I see them getting 7 wins at the max. Maybe they can get more. You never know. It's college football. Anything can happen. The fourth team we're going to talk about today for my win projection is the Cincinnati Bearcats with their new head coach. Their win projection is at 5, set at 5 wins. I'm taking the under for 2 reasons. One, they're also going to be in a new conference, and nobody knows who their QB is going to be. It could be Ben Bryant. It could be somebody else. Maybe Evan Prater. But I just don't see how they compete in their first year in the Big 12, and how they get more than 5 wins. And the last team we're going to talk about today on my projections for college football, my win projections over under for college football, is the Florida Gators. Florida fans, I'm sorry, but you might be mad at me for this. I'm taking the under. Your win total set at 5.5. I'm taking the under for one big reason. You have a blaring weakness, and it's at QB. You don't know whether it's going to be Jack Miller or Graham Mertz as your starting QB. Now, whoever it is, regardless, they're going to be learning from a good head coach, Billy Napier. And like I said, personally, I would take the under of 5.5 wins for Florida because of the uncertainty of QB. Moving on, the next thing we're going to talk about today is my personal rankings for way too early top 25 for college football. I started them last episode, and it seems like you guys like them. So here's my 19 through 13 for the rankings. Number 19 is South Carolina. They finished the year very strong last year. And I think they get Clemson at home this year, I'm pretty sure. I haven't looked at their schedule, but they have a bunch of winnable games besides Tennessee, because I think if they play Tennessee, they're going to lose to Tennessee. And same with Alabama. But other than that, and maybe Georgia. They might lose to Georgia. Those will be their 3 losses. Clemson, I don't know, because they're going to have a new QB, but they still have Dabo. But South Carolina, I see them finishing top 15 in the final rankings when they come out at the end of the season next year. And now we get to number 18. And this might be a surprise to everybody. I think USF is going to be better than people are crediting him for, with a new head coach and a better staff. Jeff Scott was a good coach, don't get me wrong, but he had some areas of weakness. And one was, I went to the USF game a couple years back, and they were down. USF was down 6 with 2 minutes left in the first half, and it was 4th and 1 on their own 40-yard line. And instead of going for it, Jeff Scott decided to punt it. And I think that sealed his fate for getting fired after his second year at USF. But now with Alex Golesh, he's an offensive-minded head coach like Jeff Scott. But you saw what he did with Tennessee's offense and how good they were. Don't get me wrong, Tennessee has way better wide receivers than USF ever will, because that's the SEC, and everybody's drawn to go to the SEC more than they are the conference USF is in. But I think USF, they have a much somewhat easier route to get to the conference title game this year, because UCF's gone, Cincinnati's gone, Houston's gone. That's 3 teams that stood in their way the last decade before they left for the Big 12. Number 17, I've got Washington University, the Huskies. I think they're going to compete in the Big 12 this year and maybe not win the Big Pac-12, but I think they compete and win a fair share of games, maybe 9, 10. Outside chance they could win 11 games and maybe make the playoff, because I just don't see a realm of possibility where an Oregon or a USC, if wins the conference and makes the playoff. That's just my opinion. Number 16, Penn State. The reason I have them so low, the reason I have them outside the top 15, is because they're unknown at QB. They have a new QB this year, and Sean Clifford is in the pros now. They have a redshirt, I think he's either freshman or sophomore, and Drew Aller, and then another kid that just came in this year that's going to be a freshman, and we don't know who their starter is going to be. and they have a lot of uncertainty at certain other positions like cornerback and wide receiver. And I just don't see them competing to the standard of an Ohio State, Michigan, or Maryland in the Big Ten East. And that's just my opinion. But there's going to be Penn State fans that disagree with me and say, oh, you're crazy to think Penn State can't finish inside the top 10 when the season's over. The next team is number 15, Maryland. And there's many reasons for this. One of them is because they're returning their QB, Talia Tagovailoa. Maryland fans, let me know if I said that right. If I didn't, let me know how it's pronounced. But I think y'all are in store for a big year. And there's an outside chance that Maryland might finish ahead of Penn State, Michigan, Michigan State. Maybe if Ohio State has a down year, maybe Ohio State. Maybe Maryland wins the Big Ten East division and goes to the Big Ten championship game. It's too early to say right now because it's only the offseason. And that's just, there's an outside chance they could win the Big Ten. That's my gist on Maryland. Number 14, North Carolina. The reason I have them this low is because I watched their spring game and I saw two glaring weaknesses. One was their wide receivers. They lost a good one in Josh Downs and they need to replace him, and it doesn't look like they have that level of talent to replace Josh Downs at wide receiver. And then the other one is their offensive line. Their offensive line is kind of hit or miss in multiple facets and areas where you'd think it would be. And the other one is their running backs. Their running backs are young. They've got, I think, 2 freshmen and 2 sophomores that barely played last year. And so that's all I have to say on them. And then number 13 is Houston. Here's another team that's leaving the American Athletic Conference and going to the Big 12. Houston, the reason I have them at 13 and not inside the top 12 is because they're replacing their quarterback, Clayton Tune, as well. And I don't know who their quarterback's going to be. And they're going to be in the Big 12. And the Big 12 is way more competitive than the American. And just my perspective, looking on from the outside, not as a Houston fan, just as a college football fan, I could see a world where Houston comes into the Big 12, competes the first year, maybe wins the Big 12, but you got to remember, you still got OU and Texas in the Big 12 until 2025, unless somehow they leave in 2024, which I don't know how likely that is, but it's very small, slim chance that happens. But then again, who knows? Houston could win that conference, or I could look like a dummy at the end of the season for putting them in my way too early top 25. They could finish in dead last in the Big 12, going into this being their first year in the Big 12. I could look stupid and they could finish last, or I could look like a genius and they finish within the top 3 of the Big 12 and they end up making the conference championship game in the Big 12. Do we know if they win it? No. But if they make it, it makes me look smart. And it makes me look genius for putting them in my way too early top 25. And leave it at that. But now the next thing I'm going to talk about is college football coaches that I think are on the hot seat. One being, I know he just got a contract extension from the school he's at, but I think Jim Harbaugh is on the hot seat because he's 2-5. I just saw this stat the other day. He's 2-5 against Ohio State, and that's embarrassing. You've only won 2 games against Ohio State, and those 2 games were flukes. Those were not our best showings against that team up north. But and it hurts me to say this. I'm not a team up north fan, but I have friends that are, and they gave me all this nonsense saying, oh, Harbaugh's not going to get fired. Harbaugh's not going to get fired, even if they lose to Ohio State again. Well, be careful what you say. I know he just got paid, but if you look at his new contract, the buyout for his new contract isn't a lot of money. It's small, slim, and they could easily fire him and hire somebody else. And that's what I think. Another school that I think their coach is on the hot seat is Texas Tech, because they're in the Big 12. Big 12 is very competitive to a certain extent, and I don't think Texas Tech is going to be very competitive this year. With that being said, their coach could be on the hot seat if they don't win more than 5 or 6 games this year. Because I feel like if they win less, they're going to say, oh, we need to bring in a new guy to be our coach. And it's just, that's what I think. And then the last team I'm going to talk about that I think their coach could get fired, but it's not as likely as the other two, is Iowa with Kirk Ferentz. He has been there a long time. And I don't see a world where they fire him unless something extremely bad happens. For example, they have a scandal or a recruiting scandal come out, or allegations of something happening come out, and Iowa says, look, you've been here a long time, no hard feelings, but we're going to part ways and let you either retire or go take a job somewhere else, whether it be the Big Ten or coaching somewhere else, and it won't hurt us. And maybe we could hire from internally from within. Maybe your son could become the next head coach because he's been the longest tenured member on your staff. And that's just my opinion. But I don't think Kirk Ferentz will ever get fired by Iowa. But that's the show. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe. I'm trying to hit 40 subscribers by the end of June. Please, if you would like, subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. Thank you. Have an amazing day.